Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar. As many of you know, the business of managing urban forests and making cities more sustainable can be knowledge intensive. We need new information and data, whether it's through scientific research or big data businesses. But many other times, we have plenty of knowledge and data, and what we really need is to put this knowledge into practice and action. So that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. How can we become better at implementing what we know towards sustainable solutions? I will present a tool, the Knowledge Action Systems Analysis tool, that can help managers, practitioners, and scientists alike assess the landscape of knowledge coming to bear on urban governance. So in other words, the who, the what, and the where are the actors and networks producing relevant knowledge for sustainability. The motivation for this work is that by understanding how organizations are already producing, sharing, and using knowledge in cities, can we remove those barriers that sometimes limit our ability to put this knowledge to work. As a quick overview of the talk today, I will briefly describe the land use governance context of San Juan, then discuss the research questions and rationale for developing this tool. I will describe the KASA tool and the methodological steps involved in its implementation, and then provide some illustrations of its use in San Juan in 2009. San Juan is located in the northeastern coast of Puerto Rico. It has a population of about 390,000, and as the capital of Puerto Rico, it's a center of economic and political activity for the island. As a Caribbean coastal city, the city is vulnerable to various climate-related impacts such as sea level rise, hurricanes, and flooding. State and local decision makers are paying more attention to this issue and the need to develop adaptation strategies. The municipality of San Juan, for instance, is interested in using green infrastructure as a potential strategy to reduce flood risk in the city. Knowledge is needed to develop these adaptation strategies, and the San Juan Urban Long-Term Research Program and the Forest Service Field Station at the International Institute of Tropical Forestry have been studying the relationship and potential of urban green infrastructure for sustainable watershed management. Implementing this knowledge, however, has been a challenge because of the institutional complexity of governing land and green infrastructure in San Juan. Traditionally, land use governance in San Juan was the responsibility of the state, such that municipal plans and zoning was done by state agencies, primarily the Puerto Rico Planning Board. This changed in the early 2000s when a shift toward decentralization was occurring across municipalities across the island to give greater power to local agencies over planning and zoning. The municipality of San Juan became autonomous in 2009, so it's only recently that it has had control over land use and urban development. In addition, the city is not just in charge of urban land uses. Because the municipalities in Puerto Rico are kind of like counties in the U.S., it also oversees large areas of rural land in the southern mountainous portion of San Juan. Finally, as with many other cities, there has been an emergence of civic governance activity where environmental and sustainability issues are becoming prevalent in participation in strategies for sustainability by NGOs, community groups, and other citizen groups. And Erika, the next speaker, will be able to talk more about those in New York City, for instance. What we have now in San Juan, then, is a governance landscape that includes multiple actors working across multiple institutional levels with interest and knowledge that sometimes can be contested, especially when it concerns how do we plan for a resilient city for the future. Given this context, then I began to question whether our ideas and assumptions for how to link knowledge and action in these different governance contexts actually work, where they're appropriate, when it is no longer the city or states that are governing, but networks of multiple actors and institutions. In looking into the literature, I found that a key barrier to making progress is this pervasive idea that science and policy or practice are separate activities, and that all we need to do is deliver the right science to the right people. But I think that, as many of you know, the linear model of one or two-way interaction of science delivery and communication doesn't sometimes work so well. And why is that? Some possible reasons are that it does not take into consideration that increasingly governance is more complex, as I said, for the case of San Juan, and where multiple actors are taking action through networks, and those knowledge and information has to circulate through these networks. Also is the realization that in a knowledge society, multiple ways of knowing or of producing knowledge, essentially different knowledge systems, are also having a role in governance. So it's not just science that is informing decision making. We hear a lot about the importance of local knowledge or even traditional ecological knowledge. But there are other types of knowledge systems that are also crucial in planning. Green infrastructure, such as strategic knowledge, operational, and even business knowledge. Then there is the assumption that actors are either knowledge producers or knowledge users. Sometimes this distinction is done to separate who are the experts and who are not. But again, what we're observing is that actors sometimes play both roles, where knowledge producers are also users and vice versa. For instance, a municipal manager may be a consumer of scientific knowledge, but she also collects observations, data, runs models, etc. within her own organization. And similarly, a scientist is not shielded from the broader context and institutional expectations for how the city should be planned and managed. So I use the term knowledge action systems to caption this more interlinked or network relationship between knowledge producers and users, the different knowledge systems that come to bear on decisions and the visions that shape practice in the city. And I'm concerned with how do we build these knowledge action systems for urban sustainability, and even more so, how do we understand how they are currently, or how they work, how the current existing knowledge systems actually work. So the Knowledge Action Systems Analysis Tool, or KASA, brings together analytical tools from social network analysis and governance approaches into an interdisciplinary methodology that stakeholders, decision makers, and scientists can use as part of their toolkit in understanding, designing, and implementing better knowledge action systems. Multiple steps and methods can be used for implementing KASA. First, the use of surveys and social network analysis can be used to map the network to see how they are configured or structured in terms of how information and knowledge flows across different organizations in the city. The next step involves identifying the central or more influential actors and their knowledge system. So meaning the types of knowledge, information, and data, the practices and methods that they use for producing that knowledge, or the technologies they implement. Then through more intensive interviews with these actors, as well as through some document analysis of planning documents, etc., we can determine which ones are the more dominant or more marginal visions for the future of the city, and how these influential actors frame problems and envision solutions. With step 4, we analyze the level of convergence or divergence between these different visions of the city. And this is to identify if there are points of conflict or points of collaboration among these different organizations, and what roles are different ways of knowing playing in these visions. And finally, with the use of interviews and participant observation, we can assess if there are specific boundaries being created that can pose a barrier to linking knowledge and action, or if there are actors that are effective at setting those boundaries and fostering collaboration. In other words, we can identify opportunities for knowledge co-production. Next, I will give you illustrations of the type of data and information you can get with KASA for the first 3 steps primarily because of the limitations of time. But if you would like more information about the other steps, I direct you to that paper below in Environmental Science and Policy. So in 2009, I conducted a survey of 110 stakeholder organizations in San Juan. This included government, non-governmental organizations, community groups, private businesses, and academic institutions. Those are involved or affected by environmental and land use decisions and actions in the city. This figure shows what we call a network map. And it shows 26 different organizations that of the 110 surveyed ones. Those are in black circles. And the lines between them represent how they are connected through knowledge or information flow. And therefore how information moves across organizations. Now, please don't concern yourself with the acronyms of the organizations. If you're not from Puerto Rico, you won't know them. But I will guide you through the key points that are reflected through this map. First, since 26 out of 110 organizations came up as having some role in the production and sharing of San Juan. This means that there's about a quarter of organizations are taking some role in knowledge. And not just government or research institutions come up in the network, but non-governmental organizations and civic coalitions as well. So since I was only expecting a handful of government and research organizations to come up in the network, I was surprised with the quantity and diversity of this network. Even though this is actually a very small network, as you will see when Erika Svendsen presents, some networks are very much bigger. But for the city of San Juan and for those organizations having a role in knowledge, it actually was larger than I expected. Also, in terms of diversity, if you look at the central actors in the network, so those organizations that have more linkages to each other because they are a source of knowledge for the other organizations and therefore have more influence or dominance over how information flows through the network, we see that the central actors are in part, some of them are the usual suspects, such as governmental organizations, here shown in blue, the 3 key state agencies and the municipality of San Juan are shown here, and established research institutions shown here in yellow, such as the University of Puerto Rico and the International Institute of Tropical Forestry. But we also find that nonprofit groups are contributing knowledge to the network as well. These are shown here in green. So what does this all mean? First, it means that the changes that I described before on how knowledge and action are linked in the context of new and network forms of governance are indeed taking place in San Juan. Therefore, the linkage is not linear. In fact, we have multiple actors involved in knowledge production and circulation, and not just your typical knowledge producers on one side and knowledge users on the other. Second, this network has positive implications for sustainability governance because it means that the potential is there for a diversity of actors and knowledge types to be involved in decision-making and action. And in theory, this is conducive to innovation and social learning, which are essential to forge new pathways for sustainability in the city. However, when we look closely at how central actors, those in the colors, interact with each other, we find barriers or boundaries that can limit this potential. And to explain this further, I would like you to imagine now that I'm going to be zoning in to those circles and colors, and now I'm just going to show you this in the next slide with only the linkages among them in red, and all the other circles will disappear for the purposes of this point. So you see here the same central actors I showed you before in the different color scheme, but you see that some of these central actors are not connected or sharing knowledge with each other. Particularly if you look at the state government agencies in blue and local government or other groups working locally in green and blue. So there is a gap of information flow between top and bottom organizations. And what's most concerning is the gap between the 2 agencies in charge of urban planning in San Juan, basically the planning board, the one that says PB, and the San Juan Municipality Office of Territorial Planning, the SJTOP. And so the 2 main organizations in charge of land planning are not linked to each other. Also, when I researched the goals and visions that these organizations have for the city, I found that there are multiple visions and different ways that the problems and solutions for the city are being framed. And these dashed circles represent those different visions. While most of the actors envision a sustainable city, they emphasize different dimensions of sustainability. So some, especially state agencies in the top circles in blue, are emphasizing economic sustainability. And I'm going to show you now in the next slide another way of looking at these different visions. Again, you have the different visions here, and the state agencies are mainly with the economically sustainable city vision. But then if you look at the ecological sustainable cities, groups like scientific and environmental groups are emphasizing this more ecological dimension of sustainability, and the municipality is emphasizing more short-term social concerns, immediate social concerns about the city. So neither of these visions promoted by these organizations provide an integrated vision of sustainability. The differences in visions can be explained in part by the procedures used to develop them, the last two rows of this table, and the knowledge systems used to create them. And so in some cases, the procedure was more based on probably expert consultation that had relied on more bureaucratic technical planning, whereas in other visions, they were developed through more consultative participation that included civic participation and other types of knowledge systems, as well as scientific and managerial approaches. But having different visions is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, they're all important to forge pathways for sustainability. However, when the time comes to deliberate which pathways to take and the type of transition actions that we need to do, including what types of knowledge action systems are necessary, these differences will need to be evaluated, deliberated, and managed across these different communities through leadership and intention in the city. In conclusion, then, the points that I hope that I've conveyed to you this morning are that first, we really need to move beyond linear models of how knowledge and action are linked in order to make progress for how this is actually working on the ground and working with that context. The KASA method is a tool that can help examine how these networks are working, how they are or are not shaping decision-making in action, and therefore aid users in understanding what does the terrain of knowledge and action look like. What do people know? Who has the relevant knowledge? How is this knowledge flowing? What are opportunity and constraints necessary? And this is all necessary in order to foster innovation in the city. And the hope is, and ultimately the objective of this tool is to help improve the type of design and processes such as science delivery strategies or even collaborative knowledge production projects for allowing more better knowledge co-production among different groups, scientists, government agencies, civic organizations, etc., to together forge and move towards these visions of sustainability. I'd like to acknowledge a few institutions that have provided support and help with this research, and if you have any questions after Erika's done, I'm happy to address them. Thank you so much.